Captain Alex Morrison stood on the bridge of his warship and stared at the red warning zone on the star map. The entire section of space was marked with danger symbols and warning messages in dozens of alien languages. All of them said the same thing: do not enter human space, or you will die. Morrison was a Zelrani warrior with blue skin and 4 arms. He had fought in many battles across the galaxy and conquered 12 star systems for his people. His ship, the Stellar Vanguard, was one of the most powerful vessels in the Zelrani fleet. It carried enough firepower to destroy entire planets. For 300 years, no alien ship had crossed into human territory and returned to tell what happened. The humans had appeared in the galaxy like a storm, expanding quickly across many star systems. And they suddenly stopped and built a wall around their space. They would trade at neutral stations and send diplomats to galactic meetings, but their home worlds remained completely forbidden. Morrison believed the warnings were just tricks to scare other species. He thought humans were weak and used fear instead of real strength. His crew of 50 Zelrani soldiers agreed with him. They had heard stories about human weapons, but stories were just stories. "Captain, we are approaching the human border," said his navigation officer. The young Zelrani looked nervous as he read the sensor data. "I see the warning beacons," Morrison replied. "Ignore them. Set course for the nearest human colony world." The bridge crew exchanged worried glances. Every spacefaring species in the galaxy knew about human space. Children were told scary stories about ships that vanished the moment they crossed the invisible line. Trade captains would go thousands of light years out of their way to avoid even getting close to human territory. Morrison activated the ship's communication system. A recorded message began playing in dozens of languages. "Warning: unauthorized. Entry into Terran space will result in immediate termination. Turn back now. This is your final warning." The captain laughed and switched off the message. "Terran propaganda," he said to his crew. "They want us to believe they are dangerous. But we are Zelrani warriors. We fear nothing." His weapons officer, a veteran named Crix, looked uncomfortable. "Captain, perhaps we should report back to command first. The High Council might want to know what we find." Morrison's eyes flashed with anger. "Are you questioning my orders, Crix?" "No, sir, but the stories about human space ... are just stories," Morrison finished. "We will enter their territory, scan their defenses, and prove that humans are no more dangerous than any other species. The Confederation needs to know the truth." Meanwhile, thousands of light years away, Lieutenant Commander Rachel Torres sat at her monitoring station aboard Sentinel Prime, a massive station orbited at the edge of human space, watching for any ships that might try to cross the border. Rachel had been doing this job for 5 years, and she had never seen an alien vessel actually enter human territory. Her sensors picked up the Zelrani ship the moment it crossed the outer detection grid. Rachel watched the tactical display as the alien vessel ignored 3 separate warning transmissions and continued moving toward the inner colonies. "Looks like we finally have a live one," she said to her partner, Lieutenant Dan Cooper, who was monitoring communications. "They're not responding to our warnings," Dan reported. "Should I try different languages?" Rachel shook her head. "They're getting the message. They just don't care." She pressed a button on her console. "Captain Walsh to the bridge. Priority 1. Within 2 minutes, Captain Ben Walsh arrived in the monitoring center. He was an older man with gray hair and tired eyes. Walsh had served in the Earth Defense Force for 30 years and had seen things that would give most people nightmares. "What do we have?" Walsh asked, studying the tactical display. "Single heavy cruiser, Zelrani configuration," Rachel reported. "They crossed the perimeter 7 minutes ago and are maintaining course toward New Boston Colony." Walsh nodded grimly. He had hoped this day would never come, but he had prepared for it. Signal all units. Protocol 7 is now in effect. Rachel felt a chill run down her spine. Protocol 7 was the most severe response level in the Human Defense Manual. It meant that an alien vessel had entered human space with hostile intent and would be dealt with accordingly. "Sir, are you sure?" she asked. "It's just one ship." Walsh looked at her with sad eyes. "Rachel, do you know why no alien ship has ever returned from human space? Because we destroy them?" "No," Walsh said quietly. "Because we let them see what we're really capable of. And after they see it, they understand why they should never come back." Across human space, hidden monitoring stations received the Protocol 7 signal. Ships that existed in folded dimensions began to move. Weapons that could tear apart reality itself powered up. Technologies that other species considered impossible began to activate. The Zalrani ship continued its journey deeper into human territory, completely unaware that it was being watched by forces beyond its comprehension. Morrison studied the star charts and picked out a likely target. A small human colony world with only a few million people. "This will be perfect," he told his crew. "We scan their defenses, maybe capture a few humans for questioning, and return home as heroes." His sensor officer suddenly looked up from his station. "Captain, I'm detecting some unusual readings ahead." "What kind of readings?" "I'm not sure, sir. Space itself seems to be changing somehow." Morrison frowned. "Changing how?" "The gravitational fields are shifting. The stars are moving in patterns that don't make sense." Morrison walked over to the sensor station and looked at the display. What he saw made no sense at all. Space around his ship was rippling like water. Stars were flickering and shifting. Position. His navigation computer was showing impossible readings. "This has to be some kind of human trick," Morrison said, but his voice sounded uncertain for the first time. His weapons officer called out from across the bridge. "Captain, we're detecting massive energy signatures all around us. It's like we're surrounded, but I can't see anything on visual sensors." Morrison felt the first touch of real fear. In all his years of combat, he had never encountered anything like this. Space itself seemed to be alive and hostile. "All stop," he ordered. "Raise shields and charge weapons." But as the Zalrani ship came to a halt, Morrison realized that something was terribly wrong. The space around them wasn't just changing. It was being controlled. And whatever was controlling it had power beyond anything he had ever imagined. Warnings about human space suddenly didn't seem like propaganda anymore. They seemed like mercy. Captain Morrison watched his sensor displays with growing fear. The space around his ship was bending and twisting like liquid. Stars that should have been light years away appeared to be moving closer. His navigation officer was pressing buttons, frantically trying to make sense of the impossible readings. "Captain, our location systems are failing," the officer reported. "According to our computers, we're in 17 different places at the same time." Morrison had fought battles across the galaxy, but nothing had prepared him for this. Space itself was acting like a living thing, and it was angry. "Can we still move?" he asked. "I don't know, sir. The engines are running, but we're not going anywhere." The Zalrani captain looked at his tactical display. It showed empty space in all directions, but his sensors were detecting massive energy signatures everywhere. It was like being surrounded by invisible mountains of power. "Sir," his weapons officer called out, "I'm reading gravitational waves. Coming from all directions. They're getting stronger." Morrison felt his ship begin to shake. The artificial gravity inside the vessel started to fluctuate, making the crew grab onto their stations for support. Through the main view screen, he could see space itself rippling like water in a storm. What Morrison didn't know was that humanity had spent 3 centuries developing technologies that other species thought were impossible. While aliens had improved their existing weapons and ships, humans had learned to control the basic forces of the universe itself. Admiral Kate Sullivan sat in her command chair aboard the starship Retribution, watching the situation unfold. Her ship existed in a parallel dimension, just a tiny distance away from normal space. Around her, an entire fleet of human vessels waited in folded space-time, completely invisible to the alien sensors. "The target is fully contained," reported Commander Jake Phillips from his station. "The space-time bubble is stable. They can't escape." Sullivan nodded. She was a small woman with short gray hair, but her eyes held the weight of terrible knowledge. "Good. Begin the demonstration. Make sure they survive to tell others what they saw." The human fleet had surrounded the Zelrani ship with a prison made of bent space-time. Using technology that treated the laws of physics like suggestions, they had trapped the alien vessel in a bubble of curved reality. The Zelrani could fire their weapons, but the energy would simply disappear into the quantum foam that held them. Phillips activated the demonstration protocol. Phase 1 beginning now. Morrison felt his ship suddenly stop shaking. For a moment, he thought the strange effects were ending. Then he looked at the view screen and saw something that made his blood freeze. Wall of pure energy had appeared around his ship. It looked like a solid barrier made of stars and lightning. The wall was perfectly smooth and stretched in all directions as far as he could see. "Fire at the barrier," Morrison ordered. "Full power." His weapons officer targeted the energy wall and fired the ship's most powerful plasma cannons. The bright blue energy beams struck the barrier and simply vanished. There was no explosion, no damage, nothing. The wall absorbed the weapon's fire like it was nothing. "Sir, our most powerful weapons had no effect," the officer reported. Morrison stared at the barrier in disbelief. His ship carried enough firepower to destroy planets, but the human defenses had swallowed his attack without even a flash. "Phase 2, Phillips announced from the Retribution. The space around Morrison's ship began to compress. The Zelrani captain watched in horror as the energy wall started moving inward from all sides. But this wasn't a normal compression. The humans were squeezing space itself, using gravity as a weapon. Morrison felt the pressure building inside. His ship, the hull, began to creak and groan as forces beyond understanding pressed against it. His crew looked at him with panic in their eyes. "Captain, the hull is starting to buckle," his engineer called out. "Whatever they're doing, it's crushing us from all directions at once." The demonstration continued for exactly 60 seconds. Morrison's ship was squeezed like a grape by the universe itself. The hull plates bent inward, but they didn't break. The humans were applying just enough pressure to terrify the crew, without killing them. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the pressure stopped. The energy wall faded away. The gravitational waves disappeared. Space returned to normal around the Zelrani vessel. Morrison and his crew gasped for breath as their ship's systems slowly returned to normal. The captain looked around his bridge at the frightened faces of his warriors. These were soldiers who had conquered star systems, but they had never faced anything like this. "Captain," his communication officer said in a shaking voice, "We're receiving a transmission." "Put it through," Morrison replied. A human voice spoke in perfect Zelrani language. "You were warned. Your vessel will be returned to your space as a message to others. You will survive to tell them what you witnessed here. Remember this day." Before Morrison could respond, his ship was picked up by invisible hands. The Zelrani vessel was grabbed by forces that treated interstellar distances like small steps. In seconds, they were hurled back across the border into their own space. The ship's engines were dead. The weapon systems were offline. Life support was failing. Every system had been precisely damaged to make the vessel helpless, but still able to keep the crew alive. Morrison drifted in the darkness of space, surrounded by the wreckage of his pride. His mighty warship had been disabled by humans who never even showed themselves. They had demonstrated power that made his weapons look like toys. 3 days later, a Zelrani rescue fleet found the stellar vanguard floating dead in space. Morrison and his crew were taken back to their home world, where they would have to explain what had happened to them. The captain sat in his hospital bed, staring at the ceiling. He had entered human space as a conqueror. He had returned as a messenger of fear, and he knew that his story would spread across the galaxy like wildfire. The humans had not destroyed his ship. They had done something much worse. They had shown him that they could reshape reality itself, and they had chosen to let him live. The mercy was more terrifying than any weapon. Morrison closed his eyes and tried to forget the sight of space ending around his ship. But he knew he would never forget, and neither would anyone else who heard his story. Captain Morrison sat in the medical bay of the rescue ship, staring at his hands. They were shaking, and he couldn't make them stop. The Zelrani doctors had checked him over and found nothing wrong with his body. But Morrison knew the problem wasn't physical. It was in his mind. The other survivors from his crew were in the same condition. 50 brave Zelrani warriors, all of them reduced to nervous wrecks by what they had seen in human space. Some of them couldn't sleep. Others wouldn't stop talking about the walls of energy and the way space had bent around their ship. "Captain," said his medical officer, a young Zelrani named Vex, "the rescue fleet commander wants to speak with you." Morrison nodded and followed Vex to the communication room. Fleet Commander Zorax was waiting for him on the main screen. Zorax was an old warrior with scars covering his blue skin and medals decorating his uniform. "Morrison," Zorax said without any greeting. "Tell me what happened." Morrison took a deep breath. "Sir, we entered human space as ordered. We ignored their warnings because we thought they were just trying to scare us. And they weren't trying to scare us, sir. They were trying to save." U.S. Zorax frowned. "Explain." Morrison closed his eyes and remembered the feeling of space itself closing in around his ship. The humans have weapons that control gravity itself. They can bend space and time like we bend metal. They trapped us in a bubble of curved reality and squeezed us until our hull almost broke. "That's impossible," Zorax replied. "No species has that kind of technology." "With respect, sir, the humans do. They demonstrated it. They could have killed us instantly, but they chose not to. They wanted us to survive so we could tell others what we saw." Zorax was quiet for a long moment. "You're saying they let you live on purpose?" "Yes, sir. They sent us a message after the demonstration. They said we would be returned to our space as a warning to others." The rescue fleet commander looked troubled. "Morrison, do you understand what you're telling me?" "You're saying the humans have godlike power." Morrison nodded slowly. "That's exactly what I'm saying, sir. They can reshape reality itself. Our weapons were useless against them. They absorbed our most powerful plasma cannons like they were nothing." When Morrison's ship reached the Zelrani homeworld, he was taken directly to the High Council chambers. The most powerful leaders of the Confederation were waiting for him. They had heard rumors about what happened, but they wanted to hear the full story from Morrison himself. The council chamber was a massive dome filled with hundreds of Zelrani officials. Morrison stood in the center, feeling very small under the weight of their stares. He told them everything: how his ship had been trapped, how space had been used as a weapon, how the humans had demonstrated power beyond imagination. "You used to believe this nonsense?" asked Council Leader Fax. "Space-time manipulation? Reality-bending weapons? These sound like stories from children's books." Morrison's communication officer, who had also survived, stepped forward. "Sir, we have sensor recordings. The data proves everything the captain is saying. The council members examined the recordings in silence. The data showed gravitational waves that shouldn't exist, energy signatures that made no sense, and spatial distortions that violated every law of physics they knew. Dr. Kex, the Confederation's chief scientist, studied the data for hours. Finally, he looked up at the council with fear in his eyes. These readings are real. If they're accurate, then the humans have mastered technologies that we thought were impossible. How is that possible? Asked Council Leader Thax. I don't. No, Dr. Kex replied. But if they can do what these recordings suggest, then they could destroy our entire civilization without even trying. The news of Morrison's encounter spread through the Confederation like wildfire. Within days, every alien species in the galaxy had heard the story. The humans had finally demonstrated their power, and it was beyond anything anyone had imagined. Meanwhile, on Mars, Dr. Lisa Chun sat in her office reading reports about the galactic reaction to the demonstration. She was the leading human expert on alien psychology, and she had predicted this exact scenario years ago. Fear is the most powerful deterrent, she had told the Earth Defense Council. But fear without proof is just empty words. Now they know our warnings are real. Dr. Chun had spent decades studying alien behavior. She knew that most species respected strength above all else. The humans had been trying to avoid conflict by staying isolated, but isolation only worked if others understood the consequences of violating it. The demonstration had been carefully planned. The human fleet had used enough power to terrify the Zelrani, but not enough to actually harm them. The goal was to create witnesses, not corpses. Admiral Sullivan received reports from FEX, monitoring stations across human space. Alien ships that had been approaching the border were turning around and heading back to their own territories. Trade routes that had been moving closer to human space were being redirected. The message is being received, reported Commander Phillips. We're detecting increased communication traffic among alien fleets. They're all talking about the Zelrani incident. Sullivan nodded with satisfaction. Good. The more they talk about it, the safer we'll be. But the humans had paid a price for their demonstration. The technologies they had used required enormous amounts of energy and perfect coordination. Any mistake could have torn apart the fabric of space itself, or created black holes that would have destroyed entire star systems. This was the real reason human space remained closed. Not because they hated aliens, but because their weapons were too dangerous to use carelessly. Every human ship carried enough power to accidentally destroy planets. Every defense station could create gravitational anomalies that would kill billions. Dr. Chun finished reading the reports and leaned back in her chair. The demonstration had worked perfectly. The galaxy now knew that human warnings were not empty threats. But she also knew that with great power came great responsibility. The humans had become the most feared species in the galaxy, not because they wanted to be, but because they had to be. Sometimes the only way to keep peace was to show others exactly what war would cost them. News of the Zelrani incident traveled across the galaxy faster than any spaceship. Within weeks, every major alien government had copies of Morrison's testimony and the sensor recordings from his ship. The data was studied by thousands of scientists, military leaders, and politicians. On the planet Vega Prime, the Galactic Trade Council held an emergency meeting. Representatives from 50 different species gathered in the Great Assembly Hall. The main topic of discussion was humanity and what their demonstration meant for the rest of the galaxy. We need to reassess our entire understanding of human capabilities, said Ambassador Trix of the Andorian Republic. These recordings show technology that shouldn't exist. General Nex of the warrior clans stood up from his seat. My people have fought wars for 1,000 years. We understand weapons and power. What the humans did to the Zelrani ship is beyond anything we've ever seen. The assembly buzzed with nervous conversations. Some species were calling for immediate alliance with humanity. Others wanted to form a coalition against them. But everyone agreed on one thing. The humans were no longer just another species. They had become something else entirely. What the aliens didn't know was that humanity's incredible power had come from necessity. When humans first left their home planet and met other species, they quickly realized they were in serious trouble. The galaxy was full of aggressive civilizations with advanced weapons and massive fleets. Professor Ryan Martinez had been working in his laboratory on Earth when the first reports of alien contact came in. He was a physicist who specialized in theoretical research that other scientists called impossible. When the government asked him to develop new weapons, he had a simple response. "We can't match their numbers," Martinez had told the Defense Council. "We can't build ships as fast as they can. But we can make ourselves so dangerous that they'll never want to fight us." Martinez had proposed a radical approach. Instead of building better guns and ships, humanity would develop weapons that used the fundamental forces of the universe itself. They would learn to control gravity, manipulate space-time, and harness the power of black holes. The project took 3 centuries, and the combined efforts of humanity's greatest minds. Scientists worked in secret laboratories hidden throughout the solar system. Engineers built machines that could bend reality itself. Mathematicians solved equations that described how to weaponize the laws of physics. Commander Amy Johnson sat in her observation post on the edge of human space, reading intelligence reports from across the galaxy. The monitoring station called Horizon Watch was one of dozens that kept track of alien movements and communications. "The reaction is even stronger than we expected," she reported to her supervisor. "Entire fleets are being recalled from areas near our borders. The Klingari Empire just issued an order forbidding any of their ships from coming within 100 light years of human space." Her supervisor, Captain Tony Roberts, nodded as he studied the data. "Fear is spreading faster than we anticipated. Some species are even requesting permission to send diplomatic missions to apologize for past hostile actions." Amy looked at the star charts showing alien fleet movements. Red dots representing warships were moving away from human territory, like water fleeing from a hot pan. Trade routes that had been established for centuries were being abandoned if they came too close to human space. "Sir, do you think we've gone too far?" Amy asked. "Some of these species have been our trading partners for decades." Captain Roberts was quiet for a moment. "Amy, do you know why we developed these weapons in the first place? To protect ourselves? That's part of it, but there's more. When we first encountered alien civilizations, we discovered something terrible. The galaxy is full of species that see conflict as natural. They conquer and destroy because that's what they've always done." Roberts brought up a holographic display showing galactic history. In the past 1,000 years, over 200 civilizations have been completely wiped out by aggressive neighbors. Entire species have been enslaved or driven to extinction. The galaxy is a very dangerous place. Amy studied the historical data. She had known about some of the major wars, but seeing the full scope of galactic violence was shocking. "So we made ourselves too dangerous to attack?" "Exactly. We became the one species that nobody wants to fight. And because nobody fights, we don't have to destroy anyone." The human approach to galactic security was unique in the galaxy's history. Every other powerful species had used their strength to conquer others. Humanity had used their power to isolate themselves and create a zone of absolute safety. Dr. Sandra White worked in the deep research facilities beneath the surface of Luna. She was one of the scientists who had helped develop humanity's reality-bending weapons. Her current project involved studying the long-term effects of their technology on space-time itself. "The quantum foam in our territory is becoming more stable," she reported to her research team. Our defensive systems are actually improving. The structure of space-time in the regions where we use them. This was an unexpected discovery. The human weapons didn't just bend space and time temporarily. They were actually making the fabric of reality stronger and more stable. Areas of space that had been used for defensive demonstrations were becoming more resistant to natural phenomena like cosmic storms and gravitational anomalies. So we're not just protecting ourselves, said Dr. Mike Thompson, her research partner. We're actually improving the galaxy. In a way, yes. Our technology is having a stabilizing effect on the local space-time continuum. The regions around our borders are becoming safer for all forms of space travel. Meanwhile, in the neutral zone between human and alien space, a remarkable thing was happening. Species that had been enemies for centuries were working together to study the human demonstration. The shared fear of humanity's power was creating unprecedented cooperation among alien civilizations. The Zelrani Confederation, which had been at war with the warrior clans for decades, suddenly signed a peace treaty. Both sides realized that their conflicts seemed small compared to the power that humans possessed. Other species followed their example, ending old wars and forming new alliances. Ambassador Sarah Kim observed these developments from the human embassy on Neutral Station Alpha. She was one of the few humans authorized to work outside of Terran space, and her job was to monitor alien reactions to the demonstration. The unintended consequences are fascinating, she reported to Earth. Our show of force has created more peace in the galaxy than any diplomatic effort in history. Species that have been fighting for generations are suddenly cooperating. The report made its way to the highest levels of human government. The leaders who had authorized the demonstration were amazed by the results. They had intended to protect humanity from alien aggression. Instead, they had accidentally created the most effective peacekeeping force in galactic history. But with great power came great responsibility. The humans now found themselves in a position they had never wanted. They were the galaxy's ultimate authority. Every major decision that affected interstellar relations was now made with consideration for how humanity might react. The galaxy had entered a new age, and humanity sat at the center of it all, alone in their fortified space, but more influential than any empire in history. 5 years had passed since the Zelrani incident changed everything in the galaxy. Captain Steve Rodriguez commanded the diplomatic ship Harmony as it approached Crossroads Station, one of the few places where humans and aliens could meet safely. A massive space station floated at the exact border between human and alien space, serving as a neutral meeting ground. Steve had been making these diplomatic runs for 3 years now. His ship was one of only 12 human vessels authorized to operate outside Terran space. Every mission required approval from the highest levels of government, and every crew member went through months of special training. Approaching Docking Bay 7, announced his pilot, Lieutenant Carol Mason. Station control is giving us priority clearance. Steve smiled at that. 5 years ago, human ships had been treated like any other vessel. Now they received the kind of treatment usually reserved for visiting emperors. The station's alien administrators were always extremely polite and helpful when dealing with human visitors. Captain Rodriguez, came a voice over the communication system. This is Station Commander Vex. Welcome back to Crossroads. We have several delegations waiting to meet with you. Thank you, Commander. We'll be ready for meetings in 1 hour. Steve gathered his diplomatic team and prepared for another round of careful negotiations. The galaxy had changed dramatically since the demonstration, and humanity found itself in the unexpected role of mediator and problem solver. In the station's main conference room, Ambassador Thek of the Rillian Empire was waiting with a delegation of his advisors. The Rillians were a proud warrior race, but even they showed obvious nervousness when dealing with humans. Captain Rodriguez, Vex said with a deep bow. Thank you for agreeing to meet with us. We have a situation that requires human wisdom." Steve took his seat at the conference table. "What can we help you with, Ambassador?" "The Korth Rebellion in the Outer Rim has acquired some dangerous weapons. They're threatening to use them against civilian targets. My people could stop them, but it would require destroying several inhabited planets." Steve nodded thoughtfully. This was the kind of problem that came to human attention now. When conflicts threatened to spiral out of control, alien governments turned to humanity for solutions. They knew that humans possessed technologies that could end any conflict instantly, but they also knew that humans preferred peaceful solutions. "Have you tried negotiating with the rebels?" Steve asked. "Many times. They refused to listen. They believe their cause justifies any action." Steve activated his ship's communication system. "Harmony to Earth Command. We need a consultation on the Korth situation." Within minutes, a response came back from Earth. The message was simple: authorized to provide technical assistance only. No direct intervention. Steve turned back to Ambassador Thek. "We can provide you with some defensive technologies that will protect the civilian populations. This will give you time to find a peaceful solution without the threat of mass casualties." The ambassador's relief was obvious. That would be more than sufficient. The rebels will lose support quickly if they can't threaten innocent people. This had become the new pattern of galactic politics. When problems arose that seemed impossible to solve, alien governments brought them to neutral stations near human space. Humanity would provide just enough technological assistance to prevent disasters while encouraging peaceful solutions. Dr. Nicole Foster had been studying these developments from her research center on Luna. She was the current head of Xenological Studies and had written the definitive report on how human-alien relations had evolved since the demonstration. "The most remarkable thing," she wrote in her latest paper, "is not that other species fear us. It's that they trust us with their worst problems. They know we have the power to destroy them, but they also know we choose not to use it." The trust had developed slowly over the 5 years since the Zelrani incident. At first, alien species had simply avoided human space out of fear. But gradually, they began to realize that humanity's restraint was genuine. Humans could have conquered the galaxy easily, but they chose isolation instead. Admiral Kate Sullivan, now in her 70s, had retired from active military service, but still served as an advisor to the Defense Council. She often reflected on the journey that had brought humanity to this point. "We set out to protect ourselves," she said during a recent interview. "We ended up becoming the guardians of galactic stability. No one dares enter our space because they know we could reshape reality itself if threatened. But more importantly, they know we choose not to." The demonstration of human power had created something unprecedented in galactic history. Peace through absolute deterrence, combined with absolute restraint. No species wanted to risk humanity's anger, but they also knew that humans only used their power defensively. Commander Amy Johnson, still working at Horizon Watch, monitored the daily communications between alien governments. The change in tone over the years had been remarkable. Where once there had been fear and panic, now there was respect and even gratitude. "Human space remains inviolate," she reported in her weekly summary. "But the borders have become centers of cooperation. Alien species are sharing technologies and resources in the neutral zones, creating the most peaceful period in recorded galactic history." The irony was not lost on human leaders. By making themselves too dangerous to attack, they had accidentally created the conditions for galaxy-wide peace. Species that had been at war for centuries were now working together, united by their shared understanding of what human power represented. Dr. Foster concluded her research with a simple observation: "We told them to stay away, and they listened. Not because they had to, but because they finally understood that some warnings are given out of mercy, not weakness." The Crossroads station had become a symbol of this new reality. Every day, dozens of alien delegations arrived seeking human advice on everything from territorial disputes to technological problems. The humans provided guidance when they could, always encouraging peaceful solutions and cooperation. Captain Rodriguez finished his latest round of meetings and prepared to return to Earth. As his ship undocked from the station, he looked back at the massive structure floating at the border of human space. It represented something unique in the galaxy, a place where the most powerful species chose to help rather than conquer. Set course for home, he told his pilot Dot as the Harmony entered human space. Steve reflected on the strange twist of fate that had made his species the galaxy's reluctant guardians. They had achieved the ultimate goal of any civilization, absolute security. But they had done it through restraint rather than conquest, through wisdom rather than warfare. The stars continued to shine, alien civilizations continued to thrive, and human space remained forever closed. It served as a reminder that sometimes the greatest strength lies not in what you can do, but in what you choose not to do. In the end, humanity had won the greatest victory possible. They had achieved peace through power that was never used, and earned respect through strength that was never unleashed. The galaxy was safer because the most dangerous species in it had chosen to be protectors rather than conquerors.